My pleasure today to present two awards, and this is part of an old tradition. 42 years, maybe, a long time we've been doing the Martin Luther King, and not quite so long, but just as importantly, the Rockland County Peace Awards. And I think I'll do the Rockland County one first, and then the
Is it going?
Martin Luther King one second. So, Alan, you want to come up and stand next to me while I do this one? So I want to say a few words about Brother Levin. Alan Levin is a psychotherapist, a mediation teacher, and an activist who lives and works for peace and nonviolent justice in Rockland County. It does say meditation. Mediation's good too. At least I didn't say arbitration. Meditation. One of the founding members of the Hudson Valley FOR, HUDVAL FOR, Alan is a consistent presence and often the organizer of local actions and gatherings for a cause. We'll come back to those at the end of this little recitation. As a practitioner and teacher of meditation and shamanism, he exudes a calm strength and offers a way to an inner peace through formal instruction as well as through the power of his example as a peaceful warrior. Alan came to the Hudson Valley from the San Francisco Bay Area, where he had been on the faculty of the California Institute for Integral Studies, John F. Kennedy University, and the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology. While living on the West Coast, he taught approaches to the treatment of addiction, group therapy, Jewish mysticism, and the integration of psycho-spiritual development with social-political involvement. In 1990, he founded the Holos Institute, a California nonprofit, in which he trained and supervised intern therapists to merge spirituality and psychology and the study of eco-psychology. In 2004, Alan moved to Nyack, New York, to marry Ginny Brooke, and quickly began contributing to the community. He helped establish a chapter of Tikkun, a movement to heal, repair, and transform the world, which spearheaded efforts to establish dialogue between the African American and the Hasidic communities. He joined the Rockland Coalition for Peace and Justice, and I noticed a lot of them have just now been drifting into the room. That's wonderful that we've come to celebrate this moment together. As part of their vigil, and stood at the busy intersection of Route 59 and Middletown Road to oppose the war in Iraq. He became a member of FOR and facilitated the monthly Phil Greenspan film series at our national headquarters right here in this very room, and participated in FOR's Community Dialogue series. In 2008, Alan was the organizer and the driving force for the Healthcare for All rally in Memorial Park in Nyack that attracted hundreds of participants and that included government officials and musicians such as Pete Seeger. Alan also has spoken on integrating meditation with political action at Westpac, was a panel member of a community discussion on peace and Life Leaders Forum, and has been a part of the New Futures for Palestine-Israel group. And there are a number of us that work with Alan in that capacity, Heather, Lenny, and so on, and we'll take just this moment to say that we're showing a film at the Nyack Library on January 22nd. So I hope you'll all join us again there. So we'll use this award to leverage continuing engagement. That's the point. That's right. That's why we're here. He's talking about me. Right. So, good. This is a group that's shown films promoting nonviolent solutions to the Middle East crisis and resistance to the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian territories. Alan's currently active with the Rockland Water Coalition. I said at the beginning we'd come back to these areas of action and engagement. He's currently active in the Rockland Water Coalition to stop the desalinization project, Nyack water, and to close the Indian Point nuclear plant, and to stop fracking and to protect the lower Hudson watershed. So, Alan, it's a pleasure to give you this year's Nyack Area Peace Award with much gratitude and much inspiration and envy. Thank you. Okay, sure. Okay.
I don't want my time talking about me. I want to.
Good. We will welcome Alan back to the mic then after that. We just did some business here. So,
let's catch up. So
take a breath. Just relax. So the Martin Luther King Jr. Award was established in 1979 by FOR to recognize unheralded persons or groups working in the United States in the tradition of Reverend Dr. Martin King. This year, the award is presented to Jim Murphy. Why don't you come up and stand next to me? Jim is a Vietnam veteran who's been a tireless advocate for peace and social justice, resisting militarism, and supporting the rights of military veterans. Jim served in Vietnam in 1966 and a tour in 1968 as an Air Force radio man, installing and operating small tactical radios at military bases in the Northern I Corps. His physical healing happened at Irving Street in Washington, D.C. His spiritual healing began when he joined Vietnam Veterans Against the War, VVAW, while attending the University of Maryland. Jim was Jim was inspired by the Winter Solstice Rally in Detroit and joined in on the Dewey Canyon 3 in April of 1971, where more than 800 vets, one by one, tossed their medals, ribbons, discharge papers, and other war mementos onto the steps of the Capitol to reject the war and the significance of those awards. The Vietnam Veterans Against the War, VVAW, was the organization that became the spiritual therapy for thousands of veterans. Jim became the VVAW chapter coordinator on his campus and later became the coordinator of the Maryland State chapter. For the Christmas of 1971, that would have been 40 years ago tonight, tomorrow night, he helped to plan Operation Peace on Earth, which included the famous takeover of the Statue of Liberty by 14 Vietnam veterans, one of whom was Jim. It was through these experiences that I was exposed to the power of nonviolence as a lifestyle and template for my spirituality, Jim says. Throughout his career as an educator, Jim continued to carry a strong message for peace and reconciliation. As a teacher and then an educator and the director of Shong Thai Wilderness School for court-referred teenage boys, Jim taught life skills that included conflict resolution. As a teacher at the West Side Alternative High School, a public school for at-risk students in New York City, he taught classes on drugs, war, and history, and worked to foster self-esteem in street kids and homeless students. For the 20 years that he was dean, military recruiters were banned from the West Side Highway. And the West Side High, too. In 1992, Jim and Dale Wise, editor of Post-Traumatic Press, founded with Veterans for Peace a Truth in Recruiting network to develop teams of anti-war veterans to counter-recruit in high schools. Called the New York Veterans Speak Out, they covered 40 to 60 schools per year, held trainings for other veteran and community groups, and became the largest counter-recruitment effort in the United States. As a continuous voice for peace, Jim has been a public spokesperson at countless conferences and on national media programs, appearing with Amy Goodman, Scott Ritter, Ann Wright, and others. He was a fundraiser and supporter at the Winter Solstice Iraq and Afghanistan, and is a well-loved exhibitor at the annual Clearwater Music Festival. Jim has served as a valued member of FOR's National Council since 2010, and is the founding coordinator of Veterans Fellowship of Reconciliation, VFOR, a new chapter of FOR focused on developing counter-recruitment programs and advocating for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. VFOR sends relevant books to incarcerated Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. Estimates are that there are in excess of 40,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in prison. Estimates are that there are in excess of 40,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans in prison.
Welcome home.
VFOR also strongly supports the anti-drone and anti-fracking movements, both of which are mobilizing in upstate New York, where he lives. In addition to continuing to speak in high schools, Jim's other current endeavors include a senior board member of Veteran Sanctuary, a healing collective of Iraq and Afghanistan vets, centered around a residence near Ithaca, New York. The sanctuary offers 3 healing activities for veterans: an organic, labor-intensive community farm that invites local communities and schools to join in the veterans in growing healthy food; warrior writers, sessions that encourage the writing and sharing of common traumas and issues; and combat paper, in which combat fatigues are rendered into a fiber mash that becomes the paper for their poetry and work. An innovator, a passionate and dedicated anti-war activist, and a much deserving recipient of this year's Martin Luther King Jr. Award. As we close the year, I want to make 2 other notes. The other prize we give is the Pfeffer Peace Prize, which this year went to Hakeem and the Afghan Youth Peace Volunteers. And on the 21st of each month, you can be part of a conversation with those young people in Afghanistan and with youth around the world who live in conflict. It's an area that Jim understands and participates in as well. Jim, I know, also spends many mornings now getting up and staffing a radio program on local radio. And this prize actually comes with a substantial cash gift as a part of the recognition. And I want to share with you today that Jim returned that gift to the Fellowship of Reconciliation to use in its continuing work, and that was very generous.
I'm known as a man of few words. I will keep to it tonight. In 1991, thank you, Mark, for your kind words. 1991, the Gulf War was breaking out, and there was a real, my wife and I, Susan, would drive around looking for a vigil where we could go and find some comfort, because the thought of sending troops back into a war upset an awful lot of Vietnam veterans that had struggled for years to hopefully make ours the last. And it was a very emotional time. And I sent a note out to Westpac, and they put a note up on the board over in their offices in Westchester, just saying Jim Murphy is trying to find Vietnam veterans that want to get together and have their own vigil. And that's when I met Dale Wise. Dale Wise and I came to, we couldn't find a place to have a vigil. There was one at Grace Episcopal, and they were nice and everything, but we didn't feel real comfortable there. So we came here to FOR, and Doug Hotstetler was the executive director. I said, you know, we got a few veterans and we'd like to get together because we're having a real hard time right now. And FOR opened their arms. That was the first time I really spent any time here. But if any of the veterans were here today, they would say at that critical moment, FOR, I see Sam here, FOR saved us a little bit of the time. And what we've learned from FOR is that it's all right to be spiritual, and spiritual lifestyle, and it's also really important to keep your life meaningful, which is something I learned from Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And I think a lot of people in here, the fact that you're here means that we all have that in common. We're all trying to find ways to keep our lives meaningful. And by reaching out and just helping people, just for the hell of it sometimes, is a good thing. And if you're the only one that feels good about it, that's all right. But the one thing that, I can't tell you how much wonderful support I've gotten from FOR. I was more than happy to give the money back to FOR because being on ENC, I know that we're having tough times. So I'm going to ask all of you to go out and put your arm on Shoulder's friend and have them make contributions to FOR because this organization is so important. It's so really important. And I think all of us have a story. I'm sure Alan has his FOR stories. I'm sure many of you have your FOR stories. As for me, this is humbling, and again, it's not real easy for me to be humble. I took over the Statue of Liberty there. That's got to be what it was, you know? We owned the Statue of Liberty for 3 days, you know? It was ours. They didn't know what to do with us. We were all disabled vets. What the heck are we going to do? We're going to go in there and bust these guys with all the cameras and everything on? So we got away with it for a bit. But I got a Christmas card from John Lennon and Yoko Ono, whose card in 1971 was the Statue of Liberty with a clenched fist. But I owe this organization a lot. It's just always been there for me. I'm more than happy to be here for it. So again, give a lot. Sign up for the monthly donation. We need to keep these doors open for a long time. And thank you very much to Mark. Thank you very much for all of you.
Good?
That's good.
Okay. So I actually wrote down some notes because I gave it a lot of thought, what I wanted to say today. But before I do too much speaking, I'd like to honor the spiritual and meditative aspect of the work that we all do and ask you to close your eyes for a minute. And the only suggestion I want to make is to sit, continue to breathe, and enter into the most peaceful place that you can enter into within yourself. Or think of a place where you experience peace. So about closing the eyes, I just want to read a little quote from a Western philosopher, Plotinus, who said, "We need to close our eyes and invoke a new manner of seeing, a wakefulness that is the birthright of us all. So sometimes we need to close our eyes in order to see. And so I did a lot of soul searching after I got this award. I felt very grateful and humble and surprised, and I want to thank FOR, not just for that though, I want to thank FOR for being here. It is really a jewel in our midst, and I personally had no real connection to it prior to coming to Nyack, as in the little story that Mark told. But very quickly was directed to it, and have appreciated not only what they're doing, but the more I've looked into it, what they've done. I never realized until recently that this organization, which I knew was getting close to being 100 years old, and started by a group of spiritual, religious people from different nations that were going to go to war, trying to avert that, trying to come to a reconciliation of souls, and they were instrumental in starting the ACLU. Did you know that? Amazing work that's been done over the years, and beautiful people that have come through and been involved with it. So I would encourage you to check, in addition to, you know, what Jim said, supporting it, giving money, learn about it. Read what's on their website, www.forusa.org. Wonderful stuff. Including, after I got this award, I wanted to give something back, and the two things that came to me immediately were, well, I'll start a blog devoted to the theme that I'm most interested in, and that I have, I'll be speaking about a little bit now, which is how we bring together in our lives being on a spiritual path and being an activist, or being involved somehow, relating somehow, actively engaged with the issues of the world, the politics, the social change, and so forth. So I started that blog, and the other thing was I put out a seed, which I want to put a little water on right now, which is that sometime in the near future, maybe this spring, maybe next fall, to have a full day, music, very much like the healthcare rally that we did, but a whole day. Music, multiracial, multi-ethnic bands, and speakers and platforms for all the progressive groups of all the different issues that are involved. Important that it be multiracial, multi-ethnic. I think that that's a serious direction we have to move in our movement. So, some thoughts about peace. So the first thing that I meditated on and tried to ask myself was, well, what is peace? And how do we go about, what does it mean to be a peacemaker, peace worker, peace activist? What does that actually mean? What are we doing? And I realized that there are those who are more prone to the activist mode. That is, that see the world, the horrors of what's going on in the world, the wars, the injustice that leads to war and violence, and want to change things, want to move things around, want to change systems, want to change the way countries act and organizations behave and people relate to each other, want to change legislation and so forth. And this is such important work. At the same time, what's often missing in the activist mode or lifestyle is a directed awareness into what's going on inside themselves, very often, which can lead to one burnout, or it can lead to not being very effective as a peacemaker, actually. Which is why we see so many of the peace organizations, the leftist organizations, the progressive organizations fighting with each other, because that inner work is often neglected. And on the other hand, we have the direction of going inward, of seeking peace within, meditating, chanting, praying for peace, and what's often missing here, something is missing often here, and that is that, well, to put it in a one kind of way, is that if you try to meditate for peace, or meditate your way into peace in a burning house, you're probably going to have a problem. And that's really the situation that we're in right now. The house is burning. We have climate change. We have an energy crisis that is likely to lead to a great deal of social breakdown, systemic breakdown. And unless we relate both to that inner peace-seeking and find ourselves engaged in what is around us, we lose a sense of balance, and we even lose a sense of our inner peace. I don't think you can meditate anymore into peace without being right with the world. And so what I've come to is that what I call peace now is a process that we experience when our inner world is in harmony with, or in right relationship with, what's going on in the outer world. And as we expand the depth of our inner world, we are drawn to experience more and more our connectedness with all life, and we're drawn to extend our attention to more and more of what's going on the planet. So how about right now? Right now, if I asked you all to think of when was the time that you most experienced peace? You probably think of a place that you were, maybe the woods, or maybe somewhere in nature. But where is that experience really? That experience happens inside you. Experience happens inside you, and no matter where it is that it occurs, it's a feeling that we have. And unless we do the inner work to reduce the conflicts that we have inside us, we're unable to open to that feeling, even in the most beautiful place. How many of you have been to beautiful places, and because maybe you were in a fight with the person you're in a relationship with, it just was a great big drag, right? You're looking around and saying, oh, this is so beautiful, so why can't I experience it? We've got to be right inside ourselves. And so I want to offer 3 of probably many inner conflicts that we have to face and that we have to deal with in a very experiential way. One is probably the root of it all, the war between the man and the woman. I think we all have to realize and face that the millennial-old struggle of men versus women, and the male principle versus the feminine principle, is at the root of much of the dis-ease on the planet and inside ourselves. Men have been dominating women for thousands of years, brought us to the brink of extinction, and women are pissed. Makes sense. That we have to look at that inside ourselves. How's that at work inside you? How's that inside work in me? The second one is the war that's going on, the conflict that's going on between the human and nature. Okay? The idea that humans are separate from nature, what my Vision Quest guide Stephen Foster used to call the big lie. That humans are separate from and better than nature is something that we've all been taught. Now all of these things, these inner things that I'm talking about, everybody here knows aren't true, or feels like, you know, okay, that's other people that think that. But I think we have to really look inside ourselves and see the degree to which our own addictions to comfort are part of this separation from nature. And the third is the conflict, war between the mind and the heart. And again, as civilizations have evolved or developed, devolved, whichever way you look at it, the intellectual, rational, and linear mind has come to be the only one that's given respect in our educational system and in the media essentially. And the heart and the intuitive is essentially relegated down to a lesser, if it's acknowledged at all, that kind of intelligence. And so the work inside us to heal the heart-mind, to heal the separation between that which in us considers ourselves human and that which is nature, human nature, bringing those two together and the healing within of the male and the female. So this is essentially not a theory, it's a suggestion for therapeutic spiritual work. Practices that come down to us from our ancestors, from all the traditions, speak to these issues and give us methods and ways of working on it. And so I feel like I'm urging people to just consider that. I know many of you are already looking at things in that way, but to seriously engage these questions, because it's what will make us better, not only for ourselves, but as people who are involved in organizations working for ecological sanity, peace, justice, and so forth. So, two additional things that I just wanted to share. One is that being a peacemaker doesn't mean being neutral in the conflicts, where one side of the conflict, and in all of the ones that I've mentioned, it has been, one side has come to be in dominance. It behooves us to lift up and take the side of that which is being abused. And this is true not only in these very three ancient global planetary consciousness conflicts, but even down to the very real, or they're not less, the others aren't not real, but the very issues that we face right now that are alive for us. The American Civil Rights Movement, the anti-apartheid movement, these were conflicts. It wasn't appropriate for the peace movement to be neutral in these. The Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory. There's a solidarity with the side that's being dominated. That needs to be, that I think that force of peace, that is that integration, that is that blending of, or process that comes out of an inner orientation of right relationship with what we're facing in the outer world. That force of peace tells us to move in that direction, to support, to uplift the underdog. That's one point. The other point is that peace is not something, at least that I've found, that I can feel all the time. Peace is something that I can feel some of the time. And I have to be okay with that. And I have to be okay with the fact that it's a dynamic process where I can find a sense of peace and right relationship, and then I become aware of something else. And that stirs me. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me want to move and do something, and then find that peace again by being in right relationship. So the fact that it's sometimes, I want to quote by singing a song to you to end this. And Ginny's going to join me on guitar. And this comes from another philosopher that's comes out of the African lineage and heritage, a fellow named Leadbelly. And basically what he tells us is the following. When you're driving along in your automobile, keep your hands on that wheel. Sometimes you got to relax your mind. Your mind, relax your mind, relax your mind. And it's going to make you feel so fine. Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. And when you see that light turn green, put your foot on that gasoline. Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. And when the light turns red, put your foot on the brake instead. Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. Now sing it. Relax your mind, relax your mind. It's gonna make you feel so fine. Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. Now when the light turns blue, what are you gonna do? Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. Relax your mind, relax your mind. It's gonna make you feel so fine. Sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. Now when you're walking along with a picket sign, and they scream, "You commie pinko dirty slime," sometimes you got to relax your mind, your mind. Relax your mind, relax your mind. And you're gonna feel so fine. Sometimes you got to relax your mind.
So we're going to wrap up in just a moment, but why doesn't everybody stand up and sit down all